It's about history. It's about preservation. It's about sense of place here on Eastern Long Island. With Esperanza Leon, I'm Irwin Levy, and this is Our Hamptons. Esperanza.
Hello, Irwin. I love saying that sometimes when I just sing it.
You know, the funny thing is, Esperanza, this tends to be like, now, I don't even know what episode we're in. I lost count already, but this seems to be like our standard greeting. And sometimes I re-listen to these episodes and I hear the variety of your greeting. I don't say, I only say your name, and then you are the one that respond with hello or what.
I know it's ridiculous.
It really is. It's very, but it entertains us, and hey, that's I guess that's our big priority. But we are excited about this episode in particular.
Indeed.
Because, this is really. I'm not going to say. Well, maybe I should. Why don't we just make the introduction first? We're excited.
Out with it, Irwin.
Come right out with it, Esperanza. Yes, we're really excited to have the executive director of the Shelter Island Historical Society with us today. Nanette is here with us. Nanette Lawrenson. Hope I got your name right. I didn't actually write it down. Did I, Nanette?
You did. You pronounced it perfectly, and thank you for having me here.
Oh my goodness, thank you. And the great part of Nanette being here is not only her job and being the executive director of Shelter Island Historical Society, but Esperanza, Nanette was a summer kid on Shelter Island.
Yes, I understand that that's the case, and I'm actually quite envious about that because I've always, anytime I would go through Shelter Island, take the ferry, still to this day, I feel like, oh, maybe I could just spend a summer here.
It really is such. There's certain. Esperanza, I probably shouldn't speak for you, but since sometimes I do anyway, I will. There's always, for me, been a little bit more mystery to Shelter Island than, the other parts of the East End. And I think that's as good a place to start as any, Nanette. And, and we will get into your work with the Historical Society and everything else down the road. But the sense of mystery, for lack of a better term, I hate to use this buzzword, unhampton-like reputation and vibe that it seems to have, or I perceive it to have. How have you found it to be different from the South Fork and even to an extent the North Fork, Nanette?
Well, different. Let's see. Shelter Island is very definitely a unique place. And part of the reason for that is, of course, our ferries. It's only accessible by ferries. They're not hour-long ferry rides, or 8 minutes, and I think 6 minutes on the other side. Shelter Island in the past 10 years has probably increased in population as the rest of the East End of Long Island tremendously, but it still isn't quite as congested as South Fork, North Fork. For example, during the fall, we don't have a pumpkin fest. In the spring, we don't have strawberry festival. So we don't have that traffic coming through the island. We don't have vineyards,
Right.
It's primarily residential. And we do have restaurants now that we did not have in the past that are open in the winter, which is glorious. So how is it different? It's different because people who live here like to be a little bit more secluded. It's not quite as social in terms of lots and lots of charity events, and we do have events. We have fabulous cultural organizations here, but it's not quite as dressy as the South Fork, I would say. And I think, in my opinion, most people relate Shelter Island to a more of a, North Fork vibe, I think.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Yeah. We wouldn't know all that much about dressy since I haven't worn a shirt with a collar in a year. But Esperanza, one thing that just struck me about what Nanette just said, I guess Nanette doesn't have a hank selling pumpkins in October that creates a traffic jam basically from Southampton beyond wainscot.
Yeah, it's just a quieter vibe. I mean, I know I've known people who live year round on, as they called it, the rock. And so, and it is, it just has a remoteness to it that I will joke. I mean, I say this about maybe visiting you, Irwin, in Springs, but I say I need a passport to go to Shelter Island. It just feels like you're traveling to some place that you're going to, be in a very different place than where you were before.
And there are parts of the island, Nanette, when you drive through, and I'm sure each section, if you will, each village, each has its own sort of different energy. I know the Heights, for example, the houses are closer together. You got that closer proximity to town as opposed to some of the others, but it really evokes more, and I agree, sort of the eastern end of the North Fork. It feels more rural still. It has more of a rural vibe.
Yeah, I would agree with that. The Heights, of course, being our historic district, those homes were built in the 1800s, primarily as summer home for a large population of Methodists from Brooklyn. The Cheekwood Hotel, which still stands today, served as the kitchen for those homes. So we have a lot of history this will sound funny, current. Given that, some of these buildings are still there, they're still operating as they were many, many years ago. A third of the island is owned by the Nature Conservancy, Mishamik.
Right.
And we're very proud of that. We're very happy about that. And I would say that for the most part, the new residential construction on the island, for the most part, has been respective of the environment and wanting to be, again, secluded and not a house on top of a house on top of a house. So it does have a very peaceful vibe. And when we spoke earlier, I mentioned to you that wherever I go, if I go to Riverhead or I go to Southampton, when you get back on the ferry, there is a sense of peace and there's a smell. There's a smell about the water and the ferry. And other people have shared this with me. So it's not just me.
No, definitely. I love olfactory memories or imprints. Those are so important.
And your body just melts and nothing, could be bothersome at that point. You're coming home.
And sort of, and it's interesting, like sort of, for lack of a better term, the difficulty to get to Shelter Island in a sense. There is a ferry, it's an extra step and everything else, but it's part of the beauty, I would think. Just there is a certain more of a sense of isolation. Now, Nanette, you mentioned, and this is the part that really got me, how you were, now to our audience, Nanette is an adult, but but she did relay a story how she was a summer kid on Shelter Island. That's her term, summer kid, since the 1950s as a little girl, a 2-year-old. Am I correct, Nanette?
Correct. So now everyone knows how old I am.
We don't really discuss. I knew I didn't handle that gingerly, Esperanza. I was thinking, but it's so important to, I think, our audience to evoke that sense of place.
Yes. And as we like to say also, Irwin, it's not ancient history. So don't feel.
Exactly. It is an ancient history. I'll volunteer that I was born in 1957. Esperanza is far younger, but I will volunteer that. So, but as a kid, to use your term, as a summer kid, I have to admit, I'm fascinated by what that was like circa 1950s and even later. Wouldn't you say, Esperanza, even into the 60s when you were, I guess you were a teenager, Nanette? What that must have been to be on the island during this era, and especially how it contrasts to present day.
Well, it was paradise, absolute paradise. I am very fortunate. My brothers and I were extremely fortunate. My mother was a teacher, so we were able to spend the entire summer on Shelter Island. My father was back and forth to the city. And you may have heard mention of the Daddy Ferry. He would arrive on Friday night on the Daddy Ferry and leave Sunday afternoon or Sunday evening. We got up in the morning, we had breakfast, and then we were out on the water. And we were, either fishing or water skiing or just being on the beach. We were always on the water. The very first home we lived in was a rental property on Ram Island Road. And it was owned by a couple who had come from Poland. They had some kind of a grocery business or something in Brooklyn. And this would have been in 1950, let's say 7 to maybe, well, 1957 to 1964. And we spent the summer there. We got to be very, very close with them. Their name was Sinkovich, and Pop Sinkovich taught me how to garden. And he gave me a handful of lima beans and I think string beans as well. And he said, okay, here's a little plot of dirt, and this is how you're going to plant these things. And of course, string beans and beans come up, within days. So it was really fun to watch as this little kid. Well, to this day, gardening is my favorite pastime. So I have very warm feelings about that. In I'm sorry.
No, go ahead. I wasn't meaning to interrupt because I'm just sitting here. Esperanza, I'm literally closing my eyes.
Yes, we're getting the picture.
But we're totally getting the picture. And this is Nanette, this is really a theme on Our Hamptons. We try to transport ourselves to the time and place we're talking. Actually did, Esperanza. I closed my eyes and I was like placing myself here. And that's when you heard that, yeah. So I was living the moment. I apologize for ruining your train of thought.
It's a great moment. It was a great moment. It still is a great moment. In 64, my father bought the first piece of property in Hilo Shores, which had been Hilo Farms. And then he bought multiple properties after that, maybe one a year or so, something like that. So I've built my own house on one of those pieces of property in Hilo Shores.
Oh, nice.
It's still paradise. You're still able to get up in the morning and take a walk on the beach. You can go fishing. You can walk in Mishamik. You can just be on your own porch, and just, the wildlife, of course, is outstanding. The way the population expands in the summer, of course, is a little bit, frightening sometimes. But most of that is congested into the Heights area, Bridge Street, which is sort of the main town, if you will. I use that term loosely for the Heights and for Shelter Island. There are a couple of restaurants and little shops. That gets very congested. But once you go to someone's home, you're sort of off that beaten path. So you miss all of that. Yeah. Which is very nice. Very, very nice. So now
I guess it's not for the people that don't like sort of a certain kind of or certain level of, I don't want to call it isolation completely, but I know that's, some people may feel that. They feel that even here, where where we're in the midst of it all, and in the winter, it's a whole different, not so much anymore, but a whole different way of life. I am curious about the winters in Shelter Island. That's, it's like Montauk to me. It's like the Wild West.
Yeah, because Nanette, you mentioned, in addition, when you were as a summer kid, you were actually also growing up, I guess, as a teenager, what have you. Your family were year-round weekenders. Like, you came out, all during the year.
We did. We came out every single weekend, even in snowstorms, and we came out every school holiday to spend the whole week. So that was very fortunate for us, because we, even at that point, were able to befriend and make longtime friends that I still have with people who live there year round. I wanted to just comment on the isolation and not really. Anybody can live on Shelter Island. You can be as social and outgoing and going into restaurants, going to people's homes as you like, or you can be very comfortable and be at home. There's a wide range. And in the winter, back when I was a teenager, right after Labor Day, it was pretty dark. Then certainly after the end of the year holidays, it was very dark. But now, there's quite a lot of life in the winter. The restaurants are open. It's when you make soup, you go visit your friends. The summer is very frenetic and, goes by in the blink of an eye. But the winter is when you really can kind of settle in and visit with friends calmly. And as I said, make soup. We were also, I like to think of Shelter Island as sort of a cultural hub between the North and South Fork, because we have Mishamik, the Nature Conservancy. We have Historical Society, Pearlman.
Yes.
That's the Manor. Taylor's Island. We have all these fabulous cultural entities that are there that people enjoy coming to and taking part in activities and just taking tours. So it's not as isolated as it was back when I was a kid, back when I was a teenager. I actually left the island in 1980, moved up to the Boston area, and then returned back about 11 years ago to take the position at the Historical Society. And people always ask me, well, you must have seen a big change. And I have to say, I didn't really see a big change.
Well, you know, all you're evoking, and this is something I've always felt, and I'm a full-timer now for the past year plus, but I was a year-round weekender in spring since 1989. I always used to say this place, and when I say this place, I'm talking the entire East End. And I think, Esperanza, you probably might agree with me. It sort of morphs from a resort to the country, you know, and it becomes more like the country in the off season. To Esperanza's point, perhaps not as much as it did 5 years ago, 10 years ago and beyond, but, you know, it still does. Nanette, I think we'd be interested in knowing when you were here, both as a teenager growing up, you know, and whenever, when you came here, be it for a week, for the weekend, did you leave the island much? And you and your family, like, was your orientation to the North Fork or the end or the South Fork, or really you were on the island? You were really more about staying where you were.
As a child, as a teenager, we spent a lot of time on the island because we felt so grateful to have arrived that we didn't venture too far off. But we did go to the North Fork. We go to the movies in Greenport. We go to the ocean in Southampton, but not on a daily basis. It might be, you know, 3 or 4 times over the course of a summer. In the winter, we never left the island. Once we got here, we were so happy to be here. We stayed, you know, on the island.
That's so nice. Gosh.
It's a very special place. There's a lot of pride that people who live here feel about the island. We're very protective of Shelter Island.
One of the Esperanza, if our primary mission on our Hamptons is, of all our missions, is probably maybe sense of place.
Yes.
And I think Nanette is really, you know, evoking this for me.
Yeah.
I'm telling you, if you hear these pauses, it's because I'm telling you, you're looking at me. I'm telling you, I'm closing my eyes and I'm putting my
we're both getting lost in like a reverie here, and I'm thinking of havens, and this Shelter Island actually evoking like a sense of being a haven. So what an appropriate name for this, you know, this founding father, I guess. I don't know much about the history, but of course, no Havens Beach. But also with the Sylvester Manor that you mentioned, because they were also, and this was always like such an intriguing part of Shelter Island, that I would drive by there and see the Quaker sign and I'd be like, what is that about? What is that about? You know, because things have opened up quite a bit and evolved all around, and in particular with Shelter Island, as you were saying, with these cultural organizations like the Sylvester Manor. But I didn't realize that the Sylvesters were the ones that gave haven shelter to the Quakers. Is that accurate?
Yes, it is accurate. They sheltered the Quakers, absolutely. And there is a Quaker cemetery on the Sylvester Manor property, which is the sign that you see as you drive down 114. So the Nichols family, the Sylvesters, the Havens, Bowditch, these were the original families, if you will, European families that were around in the 1600s that settled Shelter Island. We certainly had plenty of people here before they arrived. The Manhasset Indians were here, Native Americans, and had quite a sophisticated and large population before the 1600s.
Fascinating. We're going to move shortly into the more present day and your work with the Historical Society, but I do have to ask you this, Nanette. During your time on the island, and again, I think we mentioned this before we even went on air. We may even mentioned it in this episode. There is that time period, 60s, 70s, 80s, that we really find particularly fascinating. It really feels like almost before the real hate to use this word Esperanza, but I think I have to, Hamptonization of this place really started occurring. But your interactions when you were a kid, when a summer kid and everything else, and I got to bring this word into it because Nanette told me this and I just love the word. Was your socialization with both the summer kids and and she'll explain Esperanza, and the hair leggers?
Yes, the answer is yes. However, there are not that many hair leggers. And let me define what that means. That means you are born on Shelter Island, not born on Greenport, not born in Southampton, not even born on the ferry. You are born on Shelter Island. So there are not a lot of hair leggers remaining on Shelter Island, but there are a few. So we let's say the 70s, because that was the highlight of my teenage years. Let's say we had a large group of friends that included, I should say, summer kids and year-round residents, and we had about 40 of us that would move around the island in packs, and then we'd segment off. And a lot of people don't remember the phone booth. I think there were maybe 5 phone booths on the island in various places, and there'd be different groups of us at different phone booths. And you'd be by the phone booth, the phone would ring. Hey, what's going on where you are? Well, this is happening. Okay, we're on our way.
Oh my gosh.
We all walked. This is before we drove cars, and we'd all walk. And it was the phone booth that was our communication device to tell us what was going on in different parts of the island and where we didn't want to miss anything. So we'd go find out what was happening. I think that part has changed a bit. I think, I don't know, I'm not a teenager any longer, but I don't know that there is that much year-round residents and summer kids sort of hanging out together anymore. I don't know about that. I'm not so sure about
that.
Yeah. My family was a yacht club family. Some of our friends were country club golfers. And even back then, you kind of like we got together, but we were separate. You were either sailing or you're playing golf, and very few people did both. But I think that sort of isolation, if you will, of various groups has expanded. I think that's increased, that there isn't much interaction.
I mean, so they really, and this is something Esperanza and I have probably touched on this in prior episodes. We could go back 100 years to the East Hampton Star, and there was an us and them versus them component 100 years ago. So you really didn't experience it that much, but it was still something that was sort of there, basically. The year-rounders, not necessarily adversarial, but it was still obvious. Is that fair?
For Shelter Island?
Yeah.
Boy, that's a tough question to respond to. Are Shelter Island year-rounders? Those are the people that keep the island alive and moving. They're
right. No, of course.
And there were also the founding families, so they're highly respected.
Oh, there is no, we're Esperanza, and I am speaking for our Hamptons podcast. We revere these founding families. That's what we're all about. It's not anything, we're not implying anything other. It's just really, I'm just trying to get at, because you seem to be all together. Those 40 people at the phone booth were really a complete total mix of anyone and everyone. And there was nothing adversarial.
No distinction.
No distinction. Yeah, that's really where we're going.
Yeah, no. We have at the Historical Society every Saturday during the summer, we have farmers market. And we have anywhere from 700 to 900 people that come on Saturday morning. And it's every demographic of the island. So, I don't feel that there's this dramatic difference between year-round residents and part-time residents. There might be a difference with people who come out for the day or the weekend who are connected to the island because they're on their own kind of thing.
Yeah. I mean, look, we lament the disappearance of what we call in East Hampton the bonnet culture and everything else. the baymen, the farmers, things that are just unfortunately have disappeared. And that's part of what we do on our Hamptons, is really to just try to keep that, at least not necessarily keep it alive, but Esperanza, would you say just keep talking about it?
Oh yeah, certainly. I mean, that's the only way to keep it alive, is by talking about it, to have that history be told constantly. I'm just having this vision, because I know that there's, speaking of the phone booth,
God, I love
I
that phone booth story.
you
That one
just
slayed
reminded
us.
me that there is still a phone booth at the ferry, because I remember taking the ferry recently to go to the Maritime Festival in Greenport and wanting my children to go into the phone booth and say, this is how life used to be. There was no phone in there, but there's the phone booth is still there.
Right.
I'm like, this is where like Superman used to be able to change.
And we had all the phone booth phone numbers memorized.
Yeah,
Oh.
so that's so funny.
Oh,
Yeah,
this
yeah.
is, gosh.
Yeah, clearly that wouldn't be the case anymore with the advent of the or the predominance of the mobile
No,
phone.
no,
But
I save every number. I barely know my own. So for sure, but
I think going back to the idea of this, whether there was a distinction or not, I think that, I mean, Shelter Island became like the summer colony, for summer visitors, primarily in the late 19th century. Would that be? I mean, it was sort of the same, as paralleled what happened here on the South Fork, and probably the North Fork as well to a degree. But I think that's, if there was no separation. I mean, like you said, the founding families kept the island going, and then you'd have this influx of summer residents who, I don't know, in my view, were much more invested in, like your own family, in the island life, and just integrated with what the life was supposed to be like for everybody. It wasn't like, we do this and you do that, and I think that's something that has changed over the years, where that chasm has been widened, or if it ever existed. So I don't know. I mean, I'd love to know more about that history of the summer colonies, and even like the creation of Camp Quinnipiac, and things like that.
Well, where can I start? Camp Quinnipiac, of course, invites people from all over the country, really, to come and camp, adults as well as children. And many of the year-round island children go to camp there. They go to sailing camp. They go, so there again, there's not that separation so much.
Right. And that's from the late 1800s, Camp Quinnipiac?
Camp Quinnipiac is just about to celebrate its 100th anniversary. So
1920.
Yeah, early 20th
Okay.
century. That's a great point you made, Esperanza, by the way. That was really, that's something we really love to delve deep in.
Well, I know, like in Wainscott, that was the time, like the Georgica Association was
Yeah.
created in the 1880s. And then but before that, and then even during that time of the association, early on, people would visit and stay as boarders. That was the
Right.
way of life back then, was, having a place to stay, was staying with a family, a local family,
Sure.
who would rent out rooms. Very different from nowadays. So, inevitably you were integrated, you were together.
Nice.
That's actually an interesting point. Back in the 60s, 70s, there were a lot of, at that time, they were called boarding houses on the island. And we even went there a few times. I couldn't tell you why we went to boarding houses, but we did. And now, of course, it's Airbnb, or, somebody just has what's the other one? VRBO.
Right.
That really, it shifted, but it hasn't really changed. There's still those people that come out for a day, for a weekend. They're not invested in the island. When they do get invested, then they want to buy on the island. And one of the things that I really cherish about farmers market is that I listen to everyone. And it's like my barometer of what's going on. And I'm very, very pleased that a lot of people, I would say most people, who have bought or built a home on the island. They're really interested in, why is this street name whatever it is? You know, what is this neighborhood all about? They want to know. So with this influx of new people, the inquiries to the Historical Society have tripled.
Wow.
That's wonderful to know. Yeah. Yeah.
Tell me about
Because
my
I think that's not the case so much where we are.
I would agree with Esperanza on that. And boy, Esperanza, I'm becoming a bigger fan of Shelter Island than I even was prior to this episode.
A magical place. I mean, not to say that there haven't been places that have been torn down and new homes replaced, but there's a large portion of people who are truly interested in, you know, one of the topics in general inquiries is always, well, I bought this house. What can you tell me about it?
Wow. Yeah.
Oh, good.
That is
Good.
nice.
We want more of that.
Yeah, we'd like to import some of those people to the South Fork, actually. But we
that
won't,
mindset anyway.
Yeah, we won't do anything like that. But we really do need to start wrapping up. And I would like to
Dog whining here.
yeah, I would like to I would like to get more into present day because now, I mean, Nanette, you obviously had a career before this particular position. And by the way, Esperanza, I have to tell you one thing that makes me even a bigger fan of Nanette. You know, Nanette's from Queens.
Oh, no kidding.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. That was. Oh yeah. 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 We love it. I'm
now
Queen.
that you realized as you got, you know, pre-interviewed Nanette, you didn't like know this.
Yeah,
from
no,
the beginning,
I really,
right?
I really didn't. But I got to tell you, I'm all about Queens. I was just ecstatic about that. But I have to say, I mean, now again, you had a career, I mean, and everything else, but this, from everything you're describing, and by the way, this episode has been, I'm just fascinated by the place. I'm fascinated by your personal experiences, but becoming the director of the Shelter Island Historical Society, Esperanza, to me, this almost sounds like a dream job, especially for someone who cherishes this island as much as it comes off to me so well as Nanette does. Can you talk to that, Nanette, what that's like for you?
Absolutely. My previous career was in high-end retail. I have a degree in anthropology, so it's kind of a mixed bag.
That's a fit. That's a fit for a historical society.
No
for sure.
And I am not a historian. You know, I mean, I guess you could stretch anthropology and say, well, yes, you are, but no, I'm not a historian. I don't memorize dates and places and people, except when it comes to Shelter Island. And Shelter Island is such a part of my being. I've lived many places all over the country, the world, whatever. I've traveled quite a bit. This is my home. Shelter Island is my home, and it's in me, and I will never leave. You know, it's a perfect place. It's a beautiful place. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, no, and I'm curious. So how long have you served as the executive director of the Historical Society?
Sure, it'll be 11 years in March.
Because I feel like you have brought a whole new life to that organization that didn't really exist before. I mean, maybe correct me if I'm wrong. I'm not saying that things weren't done before, but I feel like there's been more involvement with like local artists. I mean, I'm friendly with Roz Diamond, for instance. I know you've done several things with her, and she's also so invested in Shelter Island. I know she and her husband, but I feel like that has been the case, you know, between the sort of, it's like a revival in a way, between Sylvester Manor and your historical society. I feel like there's been a lot more life.
Well, I think that's true. And I can speak for the Historical Society. Me, along with quite a few other phenomenally talented, passionate people, have transformed the Historical Society. In 2019, we opened the History Center, which was designed, predominantly paid for by Bill Pedersen and his wife, Elizabeth. And that was something that needed to be done. Our capital campaign for that, our mission there, was really to preserve Haven's house, which is a historic piece of the property. And then we realized, well, wait a minute, you know, we have to do both. We have to expand. We have this enormous collection of museum objects, and we need to protect our archives, which is also quite extensive. So the building certainly transformed the visual of our organization. I grew up with a very artsy family. Art has always been a part of my life. Museums have always been a part of my life. And I truly believe that art is a universal language. And I also believe that history, especially for children, you say the word history and there's a big yawn, like, oh boy.
Oh yeah, no, but I can attest. I agree with you. That to me, it creates your identity when you are exposed to history and historical places. That's how I became so invested in East Hampton. There's no question.
So we use art to tell the story of Shelter Island and tell the various stories, I should say. We're putting our exhibits together to open up this spring using our own collection, our own archives, and we'll be doing vignettes using our clothing collection and art collection and furniture collection. You mentioned Roz Diamond. Roz did this phenomenal Diamondscape, which she does, which is an multi, I don't know, what do I call a Diamondscape? This is multiple layers of images and text, and she created for us the history.
Yeah, and all digital, right? And interactive. Yeah.
It's phenomenal. And, we've had several art shows because artists who live on Shelter Island, artists are passionate people. They live on Shelter Island for a reason. It's either the light, it's the camaraderie, it's so many different things. But art tells the story of history better than any lecture could possibly do, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Esperanza, I have to say, Nanette's resume, background in anthropology and everything else, is certainly a testament and amazing qualifications for what she's doing now. But if you want to talk about what resonates with me, Shelter Island is Nanette, and Nanette is Shelter Island. That's the complete. I mean, is that
right? Yeah.
I mean, I think this is really as good a place as any to wrap up, because I am telling you, she transported me to this place, especially an era that we love so much, when in our own personal younger days, if you will, and just striking the difference between present day and now, which doesn't seem to have changed as much as it has perhaps on the South Fork. But wow, I think Nanette's actually rendered me speaceless, and that's the first time.
I see. I'm seeing that you're struggling for words.
I really am. But
Nanette, no, it's true. You exude Shelter Island from your pores, and it's it's really a wonderful thing to know you, and that you're doing the work that you do, and also to know that you serve as such a resource for people that are like-minded or are trying to be sensitive to the area, exactly. and really be part of the fabric of the community and part of the fabric of the history of the island. And
really, when this episode airs, we encourage everyone, go to Shelter Island. I think it's shelterislandhistorical.org is the website, Nanette. Visit it. And to those people on both the North Fork and the South Fork that are only just driving through to go from one fork to the other, I am totally into immersing myself deeper into Shelter Island, and I intend to do this. I may even reach out to Nanette and do this with her if she allows it.
Well, let me know.
All right, we'll have to do it.
And I'll bring children.
And you'll bring your children. Okay. Nanette Lawrenson, we cannot thank you enough for spending this time with us. This was illuminating, and really, it's good for my soul. I feel this place in my soul. So thank you.
Well, thank you very much, and come visit.
We definitely will. We definitely will. Esperanza, as always, a pleasure.
Thank you, Irwin. Thanks for this visit.
Okay. Bye-bye. Thanks so much for joining us. New episodes of Our Hamptons are released every other Tuesday. Find them wherever you get your podcasts.